He's a businessman, and he's outsmarting Dana White, who's supposedly a better businessman. You just know Dana White more, but the better businessman is Jake Paul.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Weekend Warrior podcast, presented to you by MMA Torch. I'm Rhys Lawrence, and joining me as always is Chief Editor of MMA Torch, Sean Covington. We're going to recap everything that happened over this week, combat sports related. Obviously there was no UFC this weekend, but there was a lot of other things going on, with Bellator 273, Benson, Henderson and Ryan Bader standing out, Eagle FC with Rashad Evans getting his first win since 2013. We're going to talk about Jake Paul's diss track to Dana White, and what he plans to do with the money generated from the video. Then we're going to turn our opinions over to boxing, with Tyson Fury and Dillian Whyte being signed. Also, Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano, in perhaps the biggest female boxing fight in history. We're going to talk the sad news of Jeremy Stephens being released from the UFC. And then to finish off, we're going to preview UFC Fight Night, Hermansson versus Strickland, which is this Saturday at the UFC Apex. Hope you guys enjoy. So Sean, hope you had a good weekend. What for you stood out this weekend in terms of what you've seen combat sports related?
Royal Rumble.
That's what I said.
Yeah, that's my Super Bowl, man. It's even if it's predictable, it's still a spectacle. I think it's really underrated among sports, just period. You got to go and fight 30 people. And the simplest part is you don't, it sounds simple, just throw them over. But, that becomes increasingly hard, once the further you go along in the match. And most people eliminate it when they're not paying attention, Few people, like the last two people eliminate each other, or the last person's eliminated, face to face. But that's like one of the only ones, it's got something that football doesn't have, basketball, all this, it's just different. It's a multi-man match. You don't know really what's going to happen, unless Brock Lesnar comes out number 30. then we know what's going to happen. But, it kind of trumped all of the games and stuff. I mean, besides the Niners losing, looking to move in, we almost didn't do the show today because I'm still looking to get those keys, but I'm just literally waiting to get keys to my new house. So, pretty exciting weekend. I'm looking at boxes of stuff. I'm just surrounded by boxes and, cable television right now. So.
Yeah, for those not aware, Sean's in the middle of a very exciting move for him and his family. But, and also just to touch on that a little bit, once we can get in the next few weeks, maybe months, it might be, but it probably will only be weeks. We're going to have a new setup for you guys where we'll be going visual as well. Sean's going to have a really cool setup that I think you guys are really going to like to see. And I'm going to get something sorted myself. But for now, we're still going to just be audio. But stay tuned for what's going to come. It's going to be really exciting. But yeah, just touching on that. I mean, we didn't really discuss it at the start. I didn't really list it as a thing. But, the Royal Rumble probably was one of the big talking points of this past weekend in terms of combat sport. I mean, like you said about Brock Lesnar there, because, for our listeners that maybe are more MMA focused, but they're still in WWE, a lot of former combat sports athletes, involved. Brock Lesnar, the number one, but his opponent, Bobby Lashley, a former MMA fighter as well. What was your, I mean, I've seen a lot of negative comments about WWE this weekend about the event. This is said to be very low in terms of creativity and, with things that could have been done and weren't. It was just very predictable, Lesnar losing, then getting in the main event, getting a WrestleMania main event by winning the Royal Rumble. What was your thoughts on what happened?
I was really hoping that they did something a little bit different. Dave Meltzer, and let me just say, Dave Meltzer is a jackass for, just, spoiling things, just putting spoilers up on It's not that you're not allowed to do it, but he doesn't warn anybody. He just goes and just tells everything that happens. And it's like, it's not fair. Like, you're not doing that with indie shows, with New Japan, or any other shows. You're just, whenever WWE does something, you just try to beat them to the punch. And it's like, I really hope WWE sells to like Disney or, NBC Universal, because they'll cut that crap out immediately. They'll just sue them. They'll say, hey, you know what? Here you go. Nobody told you to do this. And I know I'm going off on a tangent real quick, but it's just, it can, I know it's scripted, but there's still an unpredictability to it. You know, it really is. We didn't know he was coming out 30th. We didn't know Brock was coming out 30th, but if you're going to be one of those guys that spoils it like that, it's going to make it less fun. And people say, oh, I didn't like the Rumble. Well, it's probably because Dave Meltzer told you everything that was going to happen. Like, and, bigger than Brock Lesnar, because I think that was they shouldn't have done that, I don't think. But, that's the only way he can actually face Roman Reigns again if we're being real about it, because we have seen it a million times. The only way he could legitimately do it is to win the Royal Rumble. But speaking of Royal Rumbles, the women's Royal Rumble was where Ronda Rousey made her long-awaited return. And that was pretty cool to see. You know, another thing Dave Meltzer was, oh, Ronda's going to win and come back. And it's like, who asked you, though? You know, if someone asks you, you tell them directly. You don't need to tell us. Like, it's unsolicited reporting. You know, kind of like Tom Brady. It was reported that he retired. He has not come out with a statement yet. So,
No.
As of right now, he still hasn't made a statement, but they dropped that bombshell on like Saturday. So,
yeah,
I don't know. But yeah, Ronda Rousey was the more exciting part to me. The men's Rumble really disappointed me, but the women's Royal Rumble, after, you know, a few years taking them a few years to get it right, finally felt like a real Royal Rumble, not just a gimmicked match where they're just trying to get it over. Now, this one felt like it really meant something because there was a real unpredictability to it. So, yeah, I really liked Ronda Rousey coming back. I had friends blowing up my phone, you know, when she came back. So that's what you want. If Charlotte does something, nobody's really blowing up my phone. Becky Lynch, she's not the household name Ronda Rousey is, but I will get a text or something if she does something really cool. But Ronda Rousey still one of the biggest stars in combat sports. So that was probably the best thing that happened in combat sports this weekend was Ronda Rousey and Brock Lesnar.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a good argument that it was, because obviously there was no UFC, and if we're talking, you know, all combat sports, well, you know, because these athletes aren't obviously competing to be the talking point of the weekend for when they fight. Obviously, they're just focusing on winning. But
Right.
if you do look at what happened this weekend, I mean, you know, Bellator with Benson, Henderson, and Ryan Bader, and I would actually just collectively put all three together with, you know, because everyone, you know, that's listening and the watch, you'll get some that watch everything, some that read about everything, but, you know, mainly you'll get the people that'll just look out for the names that they know, and, you know, Benson, Henderson, Ryan Bader, Rashad Evans, they were the three names that were standouts in these cards that happened on Saturday. But, you know, all three won, which is good, but all three by decision, which is quite predictable given their age and where they're at in their careers. You know, Rashad not fought since 2013. He won by, I think it was unanimous decision. But I mean, we're not really going to sit here and like debate what's next for them. Is there another title shot in for them? Perhaps Ryan Bader, considering he's been around and he's been at the top level in Bellator for a while. But like, just give me, because we've not really sort of breached this subject yet, even though it's sort of been happening in the last, I'd say, 6 months with, you know, like Mike Tyson, Roy Jones, these type of fights been happening, Vitor Belfort, Evander Holyfield. Like, what's your thoughts on these like previous legends come back and you know, even though they're winning sometimes, I mean, sometimes they get people getting bad knockouts you're seeing. Like, do you care? Like, firstly, do you care about watching them, or do you care about seeing them in a bad state? Like what do you think?
Do you remember when King Mo? I don't know if you watch Impact like that, but do you remember when King Mo and Rampage were on Impact regularly with Tito Ortiz?
Yeah.
That's what I want to see Bellator do with Triller. I want to see, and if Impact wants to get in on it, I think they should all combine their efforts. There's a real reason why they should do that. They don't have the drawing power alone. Well, Triller does. But to speak to the Legends part you're talking about, I think that it would be better competition if we just combined them. You know what I mean? Like, then you get Jake Paul. Check it out. You combine Impact, Triller, and Jake Paul should probably just buy Impact. Let's just be for real. Like, that sounds like a really good idea right now.
Yeah, he could.
But if he buys Impact and he does stuff with Triller and mixes those two, now you got those people like millions of people watching this now. You know, he's going to land big names. We talked about Nagano and stuff like that. And, you know, even though Dana White had a lame excuse about why he didn't put the belt on him, we know why it was. Because, you know, Nagano still had the same stance after he won, that he wanted money. And he's not the only one now. More people have joined in. More champs are saying, give me more money. Figueiredo just said he wanted $1 million. He said $1 million sounds good, you know. He just made that statement saying he wanted money. So he's aligned himself with Ngannou. So flyweight division dead. I can guarantee you that.
Do you think
he just killed it.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, do you think that just because you're talking about the money thing, like, and I asked you about like the Legends coming back, do you think a big part of why you're seeing like the Rashad Evans, the Ryan Bader still around, do you think that's because they've been so underpaid and they're trying to, obviously because they can still fight at a decent enough level and they're still a big name in some respects, do you still think it's because of they've not been paid enough in their careers that they're still fighting?
But it's also more of a combat sports. You know, people just don't know when to quit. Football, you break your leg, you know, you could be done. You could be out. Like, we don't, like, Tom Brady's he's a different animal. It's taking a consistent toll on his body. You only go out there one time when you fight. Like, it's one fight still. So it's one and then one more and then one more. You know, it's always a one fight contract if you think about it. I don't care how many fights they say you have. It's always just the next fight. You don't have any fights lined up after that. You know, you might not make it out of that fight.
Yeah.
So, everybody is thinking they're the Undertaker or Shawn Michaels, you know, or everybody wants one more match. And, I know, you know, those legends aren't, no disrespect to them. They are legends, but they want to be the Undertaker. They want to go main event WrestleMania one more time. And I don't blame them. That's Donald Cerrone, you know. Donald Cerrone is more like Kane. Never really wins the big one, but very consistent. We'll always remember him as a great legend, one of the best, really good fighter. Just like Kane's one of the best, you know. But I know I always reference pro wrestling, but it's a combat sport, and it's worth noting that they always trot out their legends as well. You know, they did that in the women's Royal Rumble. They had Lita come back and Mickie James, who is, guess what? Impact's champion. She's Impact's knockout champion. So, it makes sense to have your legends. It makes sense to combine your efforts as well. Why would Impact say, no, you can't have our champion? I bet you someone, you know, people are going to be watching. They let her come out with her music and her title from another company. For all the people who bitch and moan about WWE and how they don't play well with others, they just toss you a huge bone. And that's part of her legacy. I'm really glad they did that, especially after the incident. Even though I didn't side with her over her luggage incident, but that doesn't matter because she got to do something nobody else has done. She got to take some other company's title and put it on their television screen. Like, that's huge. And think about being able to do that if you're Bellator or if you're Triller. and if you Jake Paul, you want to go to Bellator, not UFC. You want to legitimize something that's not really as legitimate. You want to stop all of these, come on, decisions. We need something better than that. We need something more. We just need something better. And Bellator is where they would work with you a lot better in terms of what they want to do. UFC just doesn't play well with others. UFC really wants to be WWE, and they're not. Like, it's not even close. I don't care how much money they're worth. They're not worth much money, but that doesn't matter. Dana White's he's not Vince McMahon, and he doesn't even understand how to use his legends. You know, he doesn't. Like, everything Dana White gets wrong, Vince McMahon has gotten correct. Like, whether we like Vince McMahon or not, that's different, but he always gets a big pop when he comes out. So, you know, he's gotten everything right. People hate Dana White, and rightfully so. He doesn't pay anybody anything, and I don't get that either. How do you let professional wrestlers get paid more than you do?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and I love wrestling. It's the top sport in the world to me. And nobody can really prove me any different simply because of Gorgeous George and his effect on Muhammad Ali. And everybody in the world knows who Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan is.
Mm.
I'm just saying, you know, you wouldn't know who Ali was. You don't know who Gorgeous George is, but you wouldn't know who Ali was without him. So that's the impact that it leaves, and that's why it's also always so intertwined. And if you're gonna get it, they need to use legends correctly. And I think Bellator does. Look at Fedor.
Yeah.
I think he's a star. So they trot him out there like a star, like he's a legend,
Like a legend,
like he
yeah.
can go, yeah, you know. So I think someone who understands that would properly do it is like a Jake Paul. I just think he needs to be at the forefront and more involved in things to legitimize it more.
Well, I think Bellator are doing, like, you know, what you said there at the start was about the fact that for these so-called, well, they are legends, but we're classing them as legends because they're at their end of their careers and they're not in the top promotions, but they're still around. They're not fighting the best competition, but at this point, who cares? Because we just want to see them win. You know, we don't want to see Rashad Evans get beat, you know, by some guy that no one's heard of and it looks bad, or we don't want to see Ryan Bader get knocked out, you know, really bad in the heavyweight division. But I think Bellator have done well in some aspects. I know they're not the number one promotion, and I don't think they ever will be. But I will give Scott Coker and a lot of the production team and all things around Bellator a lot of credit for I think they understand their role, and I know they're trying to branch out and get bigger, as any company would, but I think at the same time they do sort of realise that their position in the queue, in the line, you know, where MMA is considered. I mean, they filter a lot of talent and big draws around their legend fighters. So if you look at the top of the bill for each card, it's, you know, look at the ages on the guys. It's quite old guys. It's well-known guys, but it's guys that, especially on a weekend where there's no UFC, so they're not going, you know, against them week for week. There's nothing else but good promotion for Bellator there. I mean, they're not going to, you know, sell loads and loads of pay-per-views if they do pay-per-view. But at the same time, are they really looking to do that? I know that sounds a bit strange, but I think they're in a position where they're just trying to get the right sort of lane almost. They're just trying to work out, right, what works, what doesn't work. And for me, although I don't like to see really old guys getting hurt at this stage in their careers, if you have got guys like Rashad Evans who didn't really take any damage and still win and still create headlines for the Bellator, for Eagle FC, for example, that's just positive. And I don't know, I think there's a bit of wiggle room for what you could do with these legend fighters, and away from the top level athletes in the UFC in Bellator. There's still, Bellator's not just a Legends promotion. It's got loads of great champions, for example, where they would rival UFC champions. I mean, I would match up a lot of the Bellator champions against UFC champions, and they would be great fights. But in terms of names, in terms of branding, Bellator's obviously second, and it might go third soon. I mean, you look at Eagle FC, they are.
Yeah.
I mean, what's your thoughts on Eagle FC? I mean, it's Khabib's recently taken over. Kevin Lee, probably the number one in terms of draw right now. He's scheduled.
Yeah,
To fight.
that was a really big acquisition for them. It really was, and that's a really good formula. You got to take these free agents and you got to make what you can of them, and they're going to be, like you said, they're going to be number 2 real soon if they continue to do stuff like that. Now, is Kevin Lee the best fighter? No, but he's a hot free agent and he still has a lot of potential left. Yeah. That's yet to be seen if he's going to capitalize on it. But that's all we need is to see it. We need the chance because there's plenty of people that can go there and do good things. And that's what I was getting at with Bellator. You need the legends. If you can fight you need a fight with a legend to legitimize what you're doing sometimes. Jake Hager needs to fight Fedor. I asked him if he wanted to fight Fedor. He said, of course he does, and I think that's got to be a goal. Jake Hager's not a young guy. At the same time, he still has a young career and he hasn't really fought anybody. It's kind of like the Jake Paul of MMA.
Well, Jake Hager, obviously, for fans that are listening that may not remember that name, obviously a former WWE star, but also turned MMA fighter as well. So Sean's referencing him there. He does have MMA experience, but like you said, not very much.
Right. He just has amateur wrestling. He's got the most pins, I think, in Oklahoma history. To be fair, I mean, if anybody was listening at the time, no one was because I just started the show. But I actually, I mentioned AEW and stuff like that. And was he going there because of, had he spoken with JR with their Oklahoma background? And he said, yeah, that's definitely something he was looking at doing. So he pretty much said that he was open to doing it without, saying that he was absolutely going to AEW. But there's the important thing there that I think it's worth noting that AEW, they have their MMA, they have some MMA crossover there too with Masvidal and Paige Van Zandt and Henry Cejudo. They even have Mike Tyson, and Jake Paul's the type of guy you want to get in there too. Because he's a big name. Right? Jake Paul will get more eyes on your stuff than anybody, which is why I'm saying, if Jake Paul really wants to make a name for himself, he should go to Khabib's his company and do his first fight there because he'll have actual legitimacy to that. You know what I mean? If he wins, great. He'll probably lose, but just being in there would give them a big boost. More eyes than
Khabib would give Jake Paul one of those unknown Russian Dagestani wrestlers that are just absolute killers. You just know.
Well, true. I mean, he's, but Jake Paul has his background, and that's the great part about it. He could lose a MMA fight like that, and it's fine because it's just wrestling. He would just get out wrestled, and that's, okay. It doesn't really prove anything except that he's not a better wrestler than them. You know what I mean? So he could take that loss, but depending on the money he brings, that's, when it all comes down to the money and the eyes you're bringing, I think it'd be worth it if it's promoted correctly. He's going after Dana White quite a bit. And I know he's doing stuff with UFC. He just invested something in them or whatever he did. Doesn't really matter. He's just trolling Dana White. What he really should do is go ahead and partner up with someone else and bring Triller and bring his own unique brand of stuff and bring it to somebody who seriously wants to do it. WWE are in the entertainment industry, you know, they don't really want to do that. Impact, yes, they're in the entertainment industry, but like they're a more serious company. Take that with a grain of salt, please. Please. Because if anybody's watched the Impact, they know damn well that statement may not make sense at first. But yes, they do overall present themselves as a more serious product, despite the goofy aspects of certain areas of the company, okay? Let me just be very clear about that. But I'm going to be honest. I know it's silly, but I like the Undead Realm with, they basically had like a female Undertaker. And I thought all of it was great. I thought it was all great. She kind of did what Bray Wyatt didn't do or couldn't do. So for everybody hating and anybody who understands that, that's too bad. You can hate, send me a hate mail to Rhys. Don't send it to me. I'm not going to read it, listen to it, or care.
No, all hate's directed towards Shauna, unfortunately. I mean, I don't think I'll get any hate mail. What are you talking about?
No, but I think Jake Paul's a free agent. Like, I know you got Kevin Lee, that's good. Try to get Jake Paul. Try to get Logan Paul. Try to get someone outside of. You're gonna end up like Bellator if you get too many people ex-UFC guys. You're also gonna end up
too many Kevin Lees.
Yeah. So you can't get too many of those. You got to get somebody else.
We'll get you mentioned Jake Paul there. We'll get on to him in a second. But I just to wrap up on the Bellator and the Eagle FC, mainly Eagle FC, because I think we've talked about Bellator there about where they kind of are. It's not stale, but it's just what Bellator is for me. I mean, Eagle FC is the one that sort of because of Khabib's investment and because of the Kevin Lee signing and Rashad being there, but I think that's just to really kickstart it. I think we're going to see something quite special in the next 6 to 12 months from Eagle FC. I think there's going to be one standout event where everyone's talking about it. It might not be, very deep in the card and stuff, but there'll be names where you're just like, oh my God, I can't believe he signed with Eagle FC or something. I just feel it. I mean, with that Khabib influence and things, and when I seen the Khabib and Kevin Lee, photo of them shaking hands and obviously him signing the contract, it obviously, considering the circumstances surrounding Kevin Lee in the UFC, it wasn't a surprise to see that he was with someone else. But it always will be a bit of a strange sighting to see those two together, considering the history of Kevin especially wanting to fight Khabib, wanting to fight Islam. But I think there is something there with, especially the fact that Khabib is such a name now. He was becoming a name. Everyone knew how dominant he was being in his fights. Obviously, the Conor McGregor fight really pushed him over in terms of fame, in terms of support all around the world, mainly from Russia and the Middle Eastern countries. But I think Khabib holds a lot of influence and obviously a tremendous reputation in the sport, that he might become perhaps not in the way that a Dana White works, but or even to quote you with Vince McMahon, you always need that very charismatic promoter. Very you just can't have Scott Coker, for example. I like Scott Coker. When I listen to him, he knows what he's talking about, but there's nothing that draws you in when you sit and watch an interview where he talks. That's why Bellator's where it's at. It's not just down to him, obviously, but you need someone when you listen to go, oh, I can't wait to watch this, because he's built it up so much. And Khabib, of course, he's not going to be, outspoken and trash talking, because he's not that type of guy. But for me, his reputation may attract big named fighters that are out of contract, like you said, hot MMA free agents. And I think Eagle FC's got something there.
So I got a question for you. Do you think it'd be wrestle centric? And do you think that a wrestle centric MMA company is going to be something that the mainstream is into? Like, what's the crossover appeal of like, even GSP, the GOAT for many people, they said he would just lay and pray. Like, they thought people say to this day that GSP was boring. And that's all wrestle centric. And, that's something that, pro wrestling moved away from, because you can't chain wrestle for, 20 minutes at a time and get people invested. Now, to me, I think that's the one thing about, Eagle FC that's just it's not gonna catch on because, well, ain't nobody knocking nobody out. Nobody. Like, nobody's going for knockouts, they're just wrestling. Listen, that sounds boring as hell to me. And I love wrestling. I love it. It sounds boring as hell. Like, I couldn't stay awake during 2 matches on that card. Now, but do you think it's actually going to be wrestle centric or more mixed martial arts?
That's a really good question. Because, like you just said, being a wrestling fan and appreciating that sport and that aspect of combat sport, I get where you're coming from, because even, us being combat sports gurus, we love it, we love talking about it. You sit and watch a card, and I think a lot of people that are listening would agree that if you sat and watched even like a UFC card and every single fight went the distance and the majority of it was wrestling, even though I love watching the exchanges and, reverse positions, the grappling, if it's high level, it's great. But if you watch every fight and they're all like that, and we say that, and people may think, well, that's never going to happen on a full card. But if the fights on Eagle FC are structured in the way they are currently, with a lot of Russian, Dagestani wrestlers influenced by Khabib, that could easily become a problem, because in Khabib's world, that's great and that's high level, and it is, but he's coming from it from a position where he's already reached the fame, the money, the eyeballs, but it wasn't just for Khabib. It was popular and it was exciting because he was so dominant. But when you're watching guys that you don't know the names of do it to each other, and it's not a Conor McGregor on the other side, and it's not, just Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, like, you're not seeing the opposite of what Khabib was. You're seeing 2 Khabibs in the octagon. That may become a problem. I don't know, because that's like what I said about the influence. I think Khabib could have influence in bringing at least, American talent into this promotion. I don't think it's just going to be flooded with Russian talent. But if it is, yeah, maybe it won't become the second biggest combat sport promotion.
Yeah, I mean, no, but you're right. It has the potential to be huge. They definitely can't go with that. Like, they can't have that structure of just wrestling. Like, if there's one thing about Khabib that I'll say, that keeps him from being the GOAT, he showed it in the Conor McGregor fight. Like, he can stand up with you and trade shots. He doesn't have a problem with that whatsoever. But
no,
if people want to say GSP would just lay and pray, I mean, we can say Khabib's the best wrestler we ever seen in our lives and leave it at that. I don't need to make him the GOAT. He's the GOAT wrestler, sure. But the problem with that is, that doesn't show me mixed martial arts. He's just the best mixed martial artist because he's the best wrestler. You see what I mean? So that's the knock he's gonna have on him when people see that and go, oh man, how many knockouts he got? It's like, well, he should have just knocked more people out. Not everybody. He should have just showed that, hey, I can knock you out too. He should have just done that more. Split him. If you're this good, split your wins. Say, I'm gonna knock this guy out. I know I am. I need to. I got to do this. But it was all wrestling, and people are gonna look at that and go, well, show me his highlight reel, and it's just him on top of a dude. Like, that's not, you know what I mean? It's not gonna be enough to sell people on the whole idea of him running a promotion and it being super exciting. With that said, his biggest signing was Kevin Lee. So, who had a crazy knockout. I mean, it was like 3 years ago, so it was crazy. I forgot who he knocked out, but
it was
Jesus
against Gregor
Christ.
Gillespie, another
Yes.
wrestler.
Oh my God. I thought he killed him. Looked like he killed him. Looked like he killed him, man. So yes, if you can bring me more Kevin Lees in terms of that, yes. But
Well,
I'm gonna hold out to see where they really are, where they end up.
well, you're saying you'll hold out, which is fair enough. But if I tell you that Kevin Lee has a fight and his first fight is against UFC Hall of Famer Diego Sanchez, what would you say directly to that?
I would think that Diego Sanchez needs money, and that he probably shouldn't take that fight.
I think
I don't want to see it because I don't think Diego Sanchez is nearly. He's definitely not what he used to be, but what he used to be is debatable too.
Mm.
No,
Well,
and he's one of the. For me, without him and that oh man, who did he fight? You know who I'm
Clay
talking
Guida.
about? That one. Yes. Without that fight, we might not be talking about UFC right now, but you needed fights like that. And
100%.
you needed guys like Diego Sanchez. And that sounds great on paper until I start to think about where Diego Sanchez is in his career and the fact that Kevin Lee, we just talked about how Gillespie just got knocked out by Lee. I don't think it's a good you want to see him die. Just say it.
I think Eagle FC are announcing that fight and then at the bottom of the page saying, oh, as a side note, we are also okay with Diego Sanchez dying in our octagon. Like, just
right.
We are cool with it.
Is really I don't think it's cool, like, because that is literally what can happen. I don't think it's far off and far fetched to say that. Like, people think I'm joking when I say you could die. Like, no, they all know they can. And you're kind of aiming to do that. I say kind of because you're not trying to maliciously like gouge their eyes out, but you're trying to incapacitate this person by any means, any legal means necessary. So that could lead you. Like, if it's me, if I'm fighting, like if I was just a fighter, my mentality is I'm gonna kill you. And some people try to do that. Like, it's not like Nagano probably says I'm gonna kill you, or I'm gonna at least fight you like I'm killing you. So I think that's really dangerous for Diego Sanchez to do because it's not a game and it's not just about money. It's about your health.
I think Khabib is, and along with his matchmakers for Eagle FC, have looked at that fight and put it on, and I think Khabib's just trying to get as close to obviously being from Russia and just getting that infamous Rocky quote of Ivan Drago, if he dies, he dies. I mean, like you said there about it's not a good fight for Diego Sanchez at this point in his career. I totally agree with that, and I'll just give a bit of an update to the listeners that haven't really been following Diego Sanchez in the last few years. Diego Sanchez obviously parted ways with UFC. I mean, there was talk for ages before his contract was terminated that he was going to fight Conor McGregor, another fight where you were saying the exact same thing. Why would he fight then? Obviously for the money, but that's just not a good thing for Diego at this point. But since leaving the UFC, Diego contracted COVID, and if you've seen the photos on his Instagram and that were circulating on social media, he almost died from COVID. Like what Hamzat went through with, the coughing up the blood. I think it went into his lungs, and that was only. I remember that only being only a few months ago that I was hearing about this.
Not that long ago at all. And that's another scary part about it. He hasn't been. He's always going to be like Clay Guida. He's always going to be one of those guys. And like Clay Guida's a lot better fighter than what we remember. We just remember him, we just remember all the scar tissue he has. That's all. But, the dude's
at least
had
he's still winning
30
though.
fights? Yeah. So if you want to get I would see, here you go. Give me Diego Sanchez and Clay Guida again. Do that fight. Because neither one of them is going to knock the other one out, I don't think. But, just do that. Because Kevin Lee's very different. I don't think that's smart. I don't think it's cool. Then again, we saw, Vitor Belfort, kill Evander Holyfield, basically kill him. So I guess who cares, right? At some point, we got to care about people's lives. Like,
thank you.
I was debating one of a co-host of before about the kill shot. I said, hey, you don't need a kill shot to stop the fight. If you see it coming, you can stop the fight when you think that the fighter's safety is in imminent danger. Case in point, when Luke Rockhold fell down or was knocked down against Yoel Romero and he was up against that gate, did you or did you not know that he was about to get knocked out?
Oh, yeah.
And it was the very next shot that did it. He lined him up, and I would have stopped the fight right there because that punch could have killed him. I would have been like, God, no. If you have him, I call it dead to rights. If you have a guy dead to rights, that's it. That's why they call off fights. Now, if you see this shot coming, stop it. That was a clear indication that he was about to get knocked out, and all he had to do was stop the fight. I would have been perfectly okay with that. Cause you see the guy winding up, like sometimes you can see that shot that's going to knock a guy out. That was one of those times. So this is one of those fights. Okay. You don't need Diego Sanchez to get in there and get destroyed in order for you to be like, oh yeah, we shouldn't have done that. Like,
yeah, just don't do it.
Right. I'd rather see him go to Bellator then and put over some other young talent.
I think it's just like what we're talking about obviously Eagle FC coming up, and you put a young guy still. Kevin Lee's, he's still on the right side of 30, and he's been around forever because he's just had so many fights in the UFC. He's become a big name because of that. He's fought some of the best guys in the world, albeit not always come up on the right side of a win. But getting Kevin Lee in a main event and you put him against the Diego Sanchez, I can see why Eagle FC have done it. I can see why Khabib's thought to do this. It grows the target audience. It grows it from not just being about Russian fighters. You've got the American appeal. But I've just had a quick look. MMA Mania have done an article on Diego Sanchez, and he posted a photo of himself in a hospital bed on November 26th. He's hooked up with God knows how many wires on him. And it's pneumonia, COVID, never give up, reached the title. So gets COVID, and from that, a battle with pneumonia at the same time, which has been quite common with fighters. I think Cody Garbrandt was one of the others that suffered from that. But, just like you're saying, I can see the appeal. I can see the reasoning behind it, but I can't get on board with what I'm seeing here. I don't want to see Diego Sanchez fight a Kevin Lee at this point. I mean, give him a year off, and he's going to be obviously another year older, but at least he would have a lot of time in between what he's gone through. You're talking 6, 7, 8 months.
So this is where. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're talking 7 to 8 months away from almost dying to then fighting a young and hungry Kevin Lee.
You know where Diego Sanchez would be best served, and people really need to start to understand why this is a thing. Kurt Angle wins an Olympic gold medal, right? And then he goes straight into wrestling. Because what else was he going to do? As literally a professional wrestler, literally that's what he was. I know it was amateur wrestling, but now, she has to turn to pro wrestling. Gable Stevenson, or how, I forget his name.
Yeah, Gable Stevenson, yeah.
Yeah. So, what does he do after he wins a gold medal? and he was a professional wrestler for his life. He becomes a professional wrestler. You got other athletes out there that aren't exactly going to, like, they've already been pro. If you've been in college and you've been a football player for 4 years, you've already been a professional football player, if we're being honest about it. I know you didn't get paid for it, but like, there's no way in hell you're about to go out there and sacrifice your body again to achieve nothing. There's nothing left for you to achieve. You have to go into another area of combat sports. Diego Sanchez always had the personality, always should have been doing pro wrestling. You know why? It's a lot safer than what he's doing. He can actually take care of his body better and everything. Impact Wrestling, this is what I mean. Impact Wrestling could do something easy with Diego Sanchez. He'd be perfect for pro wrestling. Perfect. Because he's going to have to condition his body in a way that won't take a toll on him. And he won't be actually fighting and getting kicked in the head anymore. It's perfect. So if him and Kevin Lee were having a wrestling match, beautiful. Set the stage at WrestleMania. But he's going to get kicked in his head and punched in his head for real. Not something he should be doing. I think he needs to definitely go to pro wrestling. Frank Mir did. Cain Velasquez did. He had matches in WWE. So, yeah. People need to think a little bit more as a linear movement, a lateral movement, but it keeps you safe, and we want to see them compete. We want to see Diego Sanchez the way he is, but we want to do it without the risk factor of losing Diego Sanchez.
Yeah. It's a difficult one. You'll have people like us who are concerned at times, want to see these great fighters still fight and do it. They may say they love it and it may be because of the money aspect, but maybe sometimes, you can't really question a fighter's heart and willingness to fight. It's their decision as long as they're healthy enough to clear, medical protocol and whatever. But, we just want to see the best fights, the best fighters, good fights, exciting fights. But at the end of the day, fighters safe, go home with their families and whatnot. And
we want to see them too. It's not just the physicality of it. We want to hear and see what's going on with them. We want him to talk to us.
It's not just fighting, it's everything. It's all the media side, it's the storylines and everything. Exactly. You want to still see that. I get what you're saying.
Ken Shamrock, that was the name I was trying to think of. He's the exact example I'm talking about. He knows fighting is not what he should be doing, but man, he is still putting on good wrestling matches. And he was one of the first to cross over. Him and Dan Severn, there's a real crossover. And people don't get that. And that crossover keeps you safe, and it gives us what we really want. Because you can't fight anymore. At some point, Fedor, I'll tell you this, Fedor versus Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania sounds amazing. It does. I know the match is going to be way different than what a fight between them would be. But man, imagine, maybe Brock loses. Maybe Fedor knocks him out. I want to see that. I'm just saying they're both protected. We're not going to get that same fight we would have gotten out of them in their prime.
Yeah.
But we can still get something. We can get the Fedor we want. We can get the Brock Lesnar we want. We can get the big build. And they could actually touch and fight each other beforehand, right? So it could be a proper build. So, that's the type of stuff I want to see. So you did interest me with Diego Sanchez, but not by fighting Kevin Lee. That sounds gross.
Yeah, you want to see Kevin Lee fight guys his age. Yeah, like a Clay Guida for a second time. That would, fights where he's not completely outmatched skill level, athletic ability. You just want to see, I think, I don't want to see Cowboy Cerrone fight anyone other than guys his age, sort of his name. Okay, maybe you won't get a guy the same level and reputation as Cowboy, but you will find a guy with a similar age, a similar record, similar fighting ability, skill-wise. We don't want to see these young, hungry guys fighting these guys that have already made their money. Yeah,
McGregor and Cowboy sounds like a good fight back for both of them, and they're like, I know Cerrone's been around longer, but at the same time, skill level, it's still the same skill level, at least
That's
it's
crazy
supposed
now,
to
isn't
be.
it? To say that, like that Conor McGregor and Cowboy Cerrone are probably right now at the same point. Like, I know Conor's had more high, obviously Cerrone's not touched what McGregor's done in the sport in terms of titles and accolades and all that, but like if you look at the last 10 fights, like look at the records,
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
you would think they were the same roundabout skill level, which is just crazy to me.
And you know what though? That's a really good, either you can build that should be a fight night because they're losers. Because right now they're losers. Let's just be for real.
Well, the records say that, so yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Recently they've become losers. So they should be headlining a fight night. And that's how you build really good fight nights and say, we got Conor McGregor and Cowboy Cerrone on a fight night.
I think the
was
UFC's revenue says no to that. I think they go, no,
but
thanks.
it makes more sense to do it because you'll build if you were in the that's where if you were in the business of building better cards. But like, again, they can't build a card. Like, you don't have a WrestleMania, you don't have a Royal Rumble, you don't have a SummerSlam. What do you have? A fight night. Yeah, that's just not gonna do it. But yeah, I mean that could be the co-main event of a big card, but you just get more mileage out of stuff. I think they don't have Grand Prix, but I think they should just do entire cards with entire divisions.
Yeah.
Why not? Don't confuse anybody. Don't say, oh, we're having this fight now. Nah, shut up. Lightweight division card, get them all out of the way, and then you can kind of mix it up again and, defend the belts on those, of course. But like, if you don't defend the belts on those, then you can just put the title matches, title fights on one card and just let it be that, instead of just not having any build. Like, we talked about the card last week. I forgot who was on it already. I get who's headlining, but there's no other names on there. Like, I think there's one other fight.
We'll get on to that because that is a good point about the fight nights and whatnot. But something that doesn't require any second thought about remembering names is, for better or worse, Jake Paul. He's someone that you will never forget. What's that guy's name again? Oh no, yeah, everyone knows who he is at this point. So I think it was maybe a week ago now, maybe less than so. But Jake Paul, obviously an ongoing feud and battle with UFC president Dana White, regarding a lot of different things that his diss track video on YouTube sort of covered. I watched it today. I heard about it, but I obviously thought about it. If we were going to talk about it, probably should give it a watch. It was only like 3-4 minutes, but
I haven't seen it.
well, I was going to ask, but if you haven't seen it, I'll just quickly give you and the listeners a bit of a description. Just really what you would expect from Jake Paul going at Dana White in terms of the UFC stuff, the fighter pay, going at Dana personally and stuff. I mean, say what you want. I mean, the production was great. The video, like it was really like a well done video. He's obviously got a lot of money to spend on it, but
Right.
was.
He's been in production too. Like, that's literally what he does.
Him. Yeah, that's him. But it was. I'll come on to the reason I bring it up is that obviously this video, anything Jake Paul does, is going to get a lot of views and attention and things. But him putting this video on YouTube, obviously there's money involved and when he makes videos and stuff. And he's saying that all the money that's made from this diss track on Dana White is actually going to be dispersed to the UFC roster that are currently earning 12,000 per fight, which is the minimum a pro athlete can be paid under the UFC. which is another, smart little dig at Dana and UFC. It was just, it was a video where it was shot in like a warehouse for the fight scenes where there was an octagon, there was two fighters, and it was Dana, it was an impersonator, an actor of Dana Whyte. Chris Cyborg was actually in one of the little skits that was in the video. Obviously she's had a bit of a battle with the UFC and her pay and things. But, I mean, if we're going to talk about it in terms of like what it actually means and things, the donation, the fighters, the UFC fighters, I mean, also it can come across as a bit of arrogance, but at the same time, I actually believe Jake Paul in that he is trying to do something for fighter pay and athletes because he's got such a profile, he's got the money, he doesn't need to do this, but he's doing it. I think he's doing it because he believes in it on one hand, and also because he thinks it's a good way to cross over into the MMA background. What's your thoughts on him, like, trying to help out UFC fighters with pay?
He got into something, so he is rich, he's wealthy, and he got into something he loved and respect, and he hates that Dana White doesn't love and respect it. He hates it. He hates him for it. And that's just flat out what it is. You can see that a mile away. He's like, hey man, but he's doing it in a very millennial way. He's like, well, I'm gonna just annoy you until you change or notice me. I'm not mad at that. I like it. I will say, but he's also, if you look at the business moves he's doing, he's all business when he does it. Like you said, he's donating to pay, the money from that to pay fighters. That's a very clean business move. I wish he would throw the business moves more in the face of mainstream media, because everybody just think, oh, he's just a YouTuber. Like, no, dummy. He's a businessman, and he's outsmarting Dana White, who's supposedly a better businessman. You just know Dana White more, or you're more familiar with Dana White, but the better businessman is Jake Paul, because he's getting people paid. And that's what business is about. He's getting viewers, he's getting pay, he's getting attention. What happens when he gets what happens when he gets something like Reebok to sponsor the fighters instead? He's in a position that if he just not cut back on the clown stuff, but in addition to put on a suit when in a boardroom, even if it's a tracksuit, I don't care. Seriously, like, put on a suit, go to a boardroom, start making some major moves, and let Forbes talk about that. Not in the gossip column stuff. TikTok star does blah, blah, blah. No. Let Wall Street Journal publish what you just did. Let them talk about it there. Because then they're going to say, hey, push Jake Paul. Now he's on then he'll be on ESPN and Fox Sports. Hey, all the things he needs to be on, he'll be on. Because right now, he needs to go that route because he's not fighting actual boxers, right? And then when he does, it's not going to be someone who anyone gives a damn about. So he needs to take a more business approach. He needs to let the business people catch up. We all see what he's doing, and I know why he's doing it. He hates Dana White's disrespectful to the business. He feels the same way Tony Khan feels about Vince McMahon. Only he's doing actual things about it, like actual things that are changing the actual MMA game forever. Like, Dana White's going to have to do something. I honestly think they're going to make him step down. Dana White's a hothead, and I don't think he's worth the money that they're giving him. I think that, yeah, he's a personality, but I think you can get Chael Sonnen to do what he's doing in terms of personality.
Oh, Chael Sonnen, the man. He, like, in terms of, we obviously, as media, we do tend to stay impartial to fighters and stuff, but I totally agree with that. Like, if there was one man...
I'm not impartial.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You do, though. You keep doing that.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to break that here for a second real quick. But,
Right.
yeah,
Okay.
Chael Sonnen, for me, just, when you watch, it's just like you just watch videos that come up every so often. Obviously, he doesn't fight anymore. And you see things that come up and you just think, like, people today won't remember. Well, they might remember, but they just don't realize, like, what Chael Sonnen brought. I mean, everyone says, oh, Conor McGregor he changed combat sports, he changed MMA, he made it exciting, and he made it this and what it is today. There was guys well before Conor McGregor, and the main man was Chael Sonnen once. So just to bring that up real quick about, if you were to bring someone else in outside of a Dana White, considering how big this may get his feud with Jake Paul, someone like a Chael Sonnen could easily take over that role, I think.
You split the role, because I don't think anybody is Dana White in terms of everything he does. I'm not gonna act like he's a nobody. He doesn't do his job. What I'm saying is you could get more mileage out of two different people. Promote Daniel Cormier to Dana White's position.
Oh, he's another one.
And then you have Chael Sonnen be the mouthpiece. Oh boy. Now UFC looks completely different. You got Daniel Cormier doing everything he needs to do for these fighters. And people love Daniel Cormier. I know there's a lot of John Jones lovers that hate Daniel Cormier, but that's about it. You take Daniel Cormier, people love him, you throw him out there, and you could be done. But no, you still want to sell the fights like Dana White can. And Chael Sonnen is louder, he's better, he's way better spoken, much more well spoken, and he can sell a fight. I can put Chael Sonnen on ESPN right now, or anywhere else.
On ESPN.
Yeah, no, I mean like anywhere on ESPN. Though.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, to do the interview, if I say, hey man, I need you to go on First Take, I need you to go on This Just In with Max Kellerman, right? He can go anywhere and do anything. Dana can't. Like he can, but he's rough around the edges. Yeah, and nobody likes that, and nobody likes him for that. They just don't say anything because he's Dana White.
Dana, to me, when you listen to him huff, because obviously when the big pay-per-views come around, Dana has to go on, like you said, the First Take, the Max on Boxing show, on ESPN and all the big major networks. And Dana, to me, when he sits there and he gets asked these questions, I've always found that, like, we're not trying to just totally discredit everything Dana White's done. He's done a lot of good things. It's not what we're saying, but what we're saying is, what I'm saying anyway is, I get the impression that Dana, maybe because of there's a lot of things going on, I don't know. When he speaks, it doesn't seem like he really is focused on getting as much information as he can so that he's prepared, so that when he gets on these big networks and he's got to sell fights, it seems sometimes that he doesn't really know. Like he doesn't, like when he does get press conferences, he gets asked questions and he always responds the same way. And it's like a safe answer because he doesn't really know what else to add. And I just think you put someone like a Daniel Cormier who has to do so much research because of the commentating job he does. You ask Chael Sonnen, who does commentary but also does, an analyst work for his YouTube page and all that. They'd be so good for being that promoting role. And like you said about that duel thing with DC and Chael, I thought that DC probably will be the successor to Dana, but I think that's a great suggestion about.
They need to go ahead and push the button on that. They really do, because Dana White's holding them back. He's a reason why they lost the Fox deal, and that was a big deal. It's a huge deal that they lost that. I know everybody trying to spin it and say, oh, they're on ESPN now and stuff. I'm like, well, yeah, but like, you're not understanding the fact that they lost it. And they lost it to something that is perceived as fake. That is a really bad look. And, like I said, people don't really, and then they went on ESPN and they have that, ESPN Plus stuff. Nobody's going to be looking at ESPN Plus to do that. They were on Fox. They were on network. They were on over-the-air broadcast television. I could turn on my television without a cable cord in the back and see UFC. In fact, that's where I watched one of Holly Holm's fights. It was good. It was a really good thing for her to be on that card. It might have been when she fought Valentina, but imagine that. Listen to what I just told you. Valentina and Holly Holm were on Fox. At least I believe so. But like, think about it. That was a fight that took place. I believe it was on Fox. And if it was, guess what? They missed out big. UFC is no longer on Fox. SmackDown gets what, like 2.5 million viewers every Friday, and it's supposedly fake. So if you're real, you should do better than that, right? No, they don't come close. And the reason they don't come close is because they don't treat their people well. You can see, people say whatever they want about everything. Like Jeff Hardy's in the news about how, WWE breaks you down mentally. Well, there's some people that just signed for big money, re-signed. They're getting six figures, and like, come on, dude, they're getting six figures a year. If you are in the UFC and you are not getting fights and you're not really you are dissatisfied with what you're being paid, you need to go do pro wrestling. Because right now is the time to do it. Either go to AEW. I highly recommend that you don't. That is a big mistake. You'll probably snap your neck or something. I don't know. You need to be trained. I don't know what would happen. I'm just screwing around. But I would go to a more reputable company, someone that's been around longer. People are going to leave Dana. They're not just leaving UFC. Ngannou wants to leave Dana, right? Like John Jones has a problem with Dana. Khabib had a problem with Dana. Like Conor McGregor, Dana. It's always him. He's the common denominator, and they know he is. And I don't know why they haven't just kicked him out yet. He's not Vince McMahon. He's not your stock isn't going to tumble because of this guy, especially if you replace him with Daniel Cormier. And just make Chael Sonnen your mouthpiece, and you are done. You know who else should be included? Joe Rogan.
I think
Joe Rogan's this huge figure.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, put him in. You get Joe Rogan because it's like, well, it's Joe Rogan. He's the man right now, controversial or not. But he's going to get more eyes on the product, and it's finally going to legitimize it and him in a way that never actually happened. You know what I mean? Like, we know he's synonymous with UFC, but they never really legitimized each other in the way they were supposed to. This would do that. Dana, Chael, I'm sorry, not Dana. Cormier, Sonnen, and Rogan. Give me those three guys as the three heads. We're good to go. You talking about making some money.
I think, we started this about, obviously, the Jake Paul and Dana White feud. And it's still ongoing. And I think, like you said there, I think you made a good point about the fact that it's the fighter and it's Dana. It's not, France, like, most recently, we'll talk about, the issues about fighter pay, and the biggest, obviously, with being Francis Ngannou, his recent conversations to media and all fight week. If it wasn't about Cyril Gane, it was about the fighter contract. It was about not being paid enough, and a lot of it was Francis and the UFC and Ngannou and the UFC. But a lot of times you were hearing also was the Francis and Dana. Dana, we spoke to Francis this week, and he was like, yeah, we had a good conversation and stuff. Saying the usual type of things that you would to keep the reporters at bay and things. But I'm not sure where the UFC is going right now. Obviously, they're never not going to not be the number one combat sport. In terms of actual, like, I don't want to say real combat sport, because wrestling is very real. People I'll say that and people might not agree, but to me it is. It takes a lot of athletic ability. It takes, and these guys do go through a lot of pain to get where they are. I watched some of, I think it was on the Joe Rogan podcast, the Undertaker's real name. I was going to give a shout out to him there. I don't know if you, Mark what? Is it? I can't. Yeah. Anyway, it's, for me, UFC will always be number one. It will be a number one to a lot of people, but I can't see where they're going in terms of this feud with Jake Paul, it's not just the diss track, it's not just him making fun of Dana White, it's him actually addressing the fighter pay with serious intentions behind it, with multiple, like you said about he's not getting the proper sports coverage, but I think that's coming. I think, ESPN and all sorts of big companies, they're really going and getting on this Jake Paul bandwagon, if you will, because for me, I just think that Jake Paul, he's doing everything right in terms of getting the right headlines out there to sports websites, social media pages, the big ones. You're not going a few days without seeing something about it. And I don't know, I don't see where this sort of situation is unfolding with Dana and Jake and the UFC and Francis and all these fighters coming. Chris Cyborg being in that video, that's a bad look for the UFC. Putting her in a video that was former UFC champion, and now she's doing a video with Jake Paul, totally disrespecting Dana White and the UFC brass for underpaying her and the many other athletes. Where do you go? Do you bring in, like you said, DC, Chael, Joe Rogan? I can't really see Joe Rogan taking over. I don't think he would do it. I think he's got too much going on. I think you need someone with the business background. We say, who's a better businessman, Jake Paul or Dana White? But Dana White will have good business sense. He's done it for long enough. DC's been around the business for a long time now. And he's not going anywhere, I don't think. Could he be the one to take over? I think a lot of people would say that it would be DC. There's obviously a massive group of people that you don't hear and don't see that support this crazy growing company that could also be the new promoter should Dana leave, should it become too personal and he has to step aside. But for me, it's an ongoing situation. I don't know how it gets resolved, but we're just going to have to see where it goes. I think that Jake's doing a really good job of trolling, which he always does with the diss track. That's one thing, but it was announced, I think it was a week and a half ago now, that Jake Paul has bought a share in Endeavour Group Holdings, which is the majority owner, of the UFC. That's interesting. I mean, it really is. He's not going anywhere, and I think everyone knows that. I'm sure Dana knows that, which I'm pretty sure he wouldn't want to know as much as he knows, but it's what it is. It's a man with a lot of money, doing everything in his power to annoy the biggest MMA brand in the world. I'm just going to read you guys something real quick from Jake Paul's Twitter. Yeah, January 25th. So it was only a week ago that he posted this. It was Jake Paul saying, "I've invested in Endeavour UFC stock with my partner to focus on UFC's standards relating to fighters in terms of fighter pay, saying that we can deliver, we can strive to deliver long-term economic value by increasing UFC fighter pay and providing them healthcare. Reaching out to Engine Number One, which is a sports company that looks to support athletes following their retirements from sports, and he says to partner on this quotation endeavour, end quotation." So another sly dig from Jake Paul there, but he's doing everything right to get under the skin, and I think we're not going to hear the end of this for a while. Whether you see a winner and a loser between the two, I'm not sure, but like I said, Jake Paul and Dana White, this isn't going anywhere anytime soon.
So if I disappeared for a second, that was because my Skype was interrupted by a call telling me that I need to pick up the keys to my new house. So, so just saying, sorry I was away, but as always, you hold it down. I hope this doesn't go away anytime soon, and I hope it sparks the revolution in everyone else, knowing that they can take down big companies. And it's not about taking down UFC. It's about changing UFC to what it's supposed to be. It's about fighter pay. It's about it's not about preaching it. It's about literally going out there and doing it. This might go on a long time, but it needs to end with a knockout by Jake Paul, in a business sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. But does Jake Paul need to win, or has he not already won? I think for me,
no, he hasn't won already yet because the pay hasn't changed yet. He's just under Dana's skin.
Yeah, agreed.
He needs to make Dana react, and once Dana reacts, he's got him, and then he wins, and then you'll see him do a 180.
But what I mean by that, and you're totally right about the fighter pay, because that's not changed yet. And I think, obviously he's not won there. What I mean about Jake Paul, I was going to ask, do you think he's already, for me, I think he's already won in terms of, he doesn't need to go and win 25 boxing fights, maybe fight in MMA to prove. I think Jake Paul's already won, because last year in combat sports, he was pretty much the number one thing. Like, you had obviously the highest level champions, amazing fights and stuff. But you ask the majority of people, what was the number one talked about athlete, fighter, whatever? It was Jake Paul. And for me, he doesn't even really need to do anything, and he's already won. He doesn't have to fight it. Like, he's already won because he's already taken all of the attention away from these fighters. And I don't think he really wants to do it because he wants to advocate for fighter pay and fighter attention, like he's done with Amanda Serrano in the co-main events of all of his fights so far, who is one of the best female boxers, in the world, and is now away to fight Katie Taylor for undisputed gold, which 6 months ago, a year ago, even I wouldn't really. I know Katie Taylor being from Great Britain, she's Irish. I've watched a lot of her fights, but if you asked me 12 months ago who Amanda Serrano was, I obviously would have I've seen some of her fights and stuff, but what I'm saying is the average fan wouldn't have had any idea who Amanda Serrano was before Jake Paul. I think he's done an amazing job in terms of bringing spotlight to fighters whilst also attaining a lot of attention himself.
Oh, he's definitely won in the terms you saying. Yeah, I just think those are more so a small victories, and there's a war he's waging. And I think that there's so much more he can do and that he wants to do that he would even see it as, I failed. But, he needs to come out of this thing with something Dana White has done because of him. Right now it's a lot of him, but when someone else does something and is attributed to him, like, this happened because Jake Paul did this, or this happened and Jake Paul, was the one that spearheaded that, that when he starts to get the credit for what is going on, that is when he's truly won. He's got a lot of, like I say, he's got a lot of small victories now, but the war isn't won yet.
I think we're obviously talking about the boxing side of things with Jake Paul and MMA, of course, with the UFC and stuff. But just focusing real quick on boxing, like I said, Jake Paul has been a very key point in getting this Katie Taylor Amanda Serrano fight done. It's going to be at Madison Square Garden. It's the first time female boxing fight's been done as a headliner at Madison Square Garden. What, like, I'm not sure. Are you familiar with Eddie Hearn in this? He's a British promoter in boxing.
Familiar with, but not.
Yes, you know the name.
Yes. I know the name. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, that's actually quite a good sign considering a lot of our listeners in the US probably would be similar in terms of their knowledge. If you're more of an MMA or a wrestling fan, or if you like boxing, you may even still not know too much about Eddie Hearn Matchroom Boxing because it's obviously predominantly a British promotion. But Eddie Hearn's the best promoter in Britain. He's one of the best promoters in boxing, period. He's got a lot of fighters under his belt, most notably probably Anthony Joshua, who is, well, set to rematch Alexander Usyk in the coming months after the news broke of Tyson Fury's next opponent. But like I said, we'll get onto that in a little bit. But just talking to you a little bit there, Jake Paul has become, outside of a very talented athlete and boxer, which I think everyone can now not even argue that he is. I think he's got a lot of skill in the boxing ring. He brings all the attention. But this fight between these two females, I mean, it's going to be a great contest. It may not have had the build-up and the press and the media attention had it not been for Jake Paul's involvement and also Eddie Hearn's on the other side. And I'm just interested the fact that there's going to be a bit of a clash between Jake Paul representing Amanda Serrano and Eddie Hearn representing Katie Taylor, because Eddie Hearn is a lot like Dana White. This is why I mention him. He is a massive personality in this country, and you will know more about Eddie Hearn than you'll know about his fighters, which is quite a crazy thing. He's that much of he's just that involved. He talks all the time on camera, etc., etc. And I'm just wondering, like, do you think Jake Paul can become, like, he's a fighter now? He's obviously had a YouTube background, but he's going to be representing Katie Taylor, who's one of the best female boxers ever, and he's going to be promoting this fight. Do you think he can cross over into becoming and rivaling like a Dana White in terms of the promotion aspect as well?
And see, I think that's where when you say he's already won, I think that's where he's already won, because to even put him in that same breath with someone like a Dana White hates it. That's why he hates everything he's doing, because legitimately you have to say that he is fastly approaching someone like a Dana White. Sure, he doesn't have the experience and stuff. He's doing the right thing. He's standing on his morals. And it's the crazy part when people say he's a stupid YouTuber. I'm like, bro, he's trying to get people paid. And these are people who get punched in the head for a living. And you don't want him to do that? You still hung up on him being someone who's, just ingrained in social media. Like, it's promotion. People like Dana White more than they like him. But for what reason? Like, the reasons need to be legitimate. Oh, Dana White's just cool. He's a badass. What do you mean? Not paying people's badass? I saw Vince McMahon not like recently, a couple years ago, he fell off of took a 10-foot bump just to show Rob Gronkowski, who run a ring right after that, just to show him how to take a bump. I don't see Dana White doing anything like that. I'm not saying that the guy's not in shape, but I don't see him in the business like that. I'm comparing people who are alike, and I'm also showing how they're not alike. And as I said before, Dana White isn't like Vince McMahon in the ways he needs to be. But you want to know who is?
Who?
Jake Paul. He's the guy going out there and doing it physically and showing people. He's got arguably a moral compass and stuff. It's weird when we talk about moral compass and all this stuff, because it's two people beating the hell out of each other. So people are like, oh, Vince McMahon doesn't do this and do that. It's like, well, don't watch two people beat the hell out of each other then. I don't know what to tell you. Or, same thing with Dana White. Like, if you don't want to get paid pennies, don't beat the hell out of people for a living. Go learn a trade. Like, you can go to school too, you know, like,
Yeah.
but no, I think that, that is the whole reason we're having this conversation is because that's who he's going to end up being. I think he should take more of a Mark Cuban approach. Like, I think what Jake Paul's doing is great, but he has a real opportunity to be on more of a Mark Cuban level, like a Shark Tank. That's the level of businessman we're talking about. And he needs to be that, not mess around with Dana White, because honestly, Dana White's just not worth the time. He needs to literally be talking to a Mark Cuban, you know? Mark Cuban's the type of guy who has a good moral compass as well. I know he's had allegations and stuff like that, linked to, the Dallas Mavericks and stuff. But you know, that's, you know, we don't have the details on that. And, he denied some stuff. I don't know about that. My point is, at least he said he didn't know. You know, Dana White knows what's going on, doesn't care. He knows he's not paying his fighter, doesn't care. I want to see Jake Paul surpass Dana White. I want to see him go that route, surpass him, like, you know, and just show the world what we really need. Be what we really need. Take a Dana White and turn, you know, it just make him much better. That's what Jake Paul's going to be. I need him to be way better than Dana ever was. I'll put it to you like this. At the end of the day, at the end of their careers, there should be no way we bring up Dana White in the same sentence as a Jake Paul.
Yeah. It's like you said, it's not going to stop this battle, if you will, between the two. But I like that there is, like you said, I like that there's someone going at a company and that there's someone. It's not just Jake Paul against Dana White. It's Jake Paul, for all that he's doing it in the way he does things. He's actually, if you look at the bigger picture and you can take it out of context of just he's being a troll, he's doing what he's always done. Look at what he's actually doing. Look what he's actually trying to achieve. You cannot tell me there's anyone that loves the sport of MMA, appreciates what the fighters go through, what the athletes endure to do what they do, to entertain the fans, that Jake Paul isn't doing what's best for these athletes, trying to help them in as many ways as he can. I really respect it, and, you know, battling off of what we were talking about of Francis Ngannou, the interview he did with Ariel Helwani on the MMA Hour, and he, after the win against Cyril, he didn't back down once, all the way through fight week. Any question he got asked, he was so honest, he was so aware, he knew what to say, he was strong, he was confident, and his stance never changed. He was like, no, I need respect. Yes, the money comes with it, but I want to be respected. And Jake Paul, in a lot of ways, is doing the same thing. He's not on the same boat in terms of being underpaid, of course, but he's on the same boat as, you need to start respecting these athletes and paying them what they deserve. And it's quite a good segue. We could talk about, you know, Jake Paul and Dana White forever. I think that's going to be on a lot of these podcast episodes going forward. But a little bit of a difference in boxing and UFC in terms of fighter pay. That's always been an issue. But Francis Ngannou, who has just come off the win against Cyril Gane and made reportedly around $600,000 before pay-per-view points, obviously, which won't be disclosed. But Tyson Fury versus Dillian Whyte, a massive British blockbuster fight. Obviously, Tyson Fury, all the fans and yourself, Sean, will be well aware of that name. He's not just a British fighter. He's, you know, world heavyweight champion. He's one of the biggest names in boxing. But I just thought exactly. I just thought it was interesting to bring that up. Obviously, that's a fight that's now being scheduled. It's reportedly going to happen in the UK, which is great as well. But I just want to bring it up as well as the fact is that it's a great fight. Tyson Fury is reportedly going to make around $32 million for that fight. And Francis Ngannou made, at most, including pay-per-view points, $1 million in terms of everything that he can gather from his UFC fight with Cyril Gane. Like, well, we know that boxing's always traditionally paid the top level athletes more money than UFC. It's been around longer. It's got more financial backing to start with anyway. I think UFC is starting to rival that in terms of the revenue they're generating. But when I give you those numbers, what are you thinking in terms of what Francis has to do, what he has to go through to prepare for a heavyweight title fight, and similarly with what Tyson Fury has to go through, both heavyweights, both risking a lot, personally, with their families, with their legacies in terms of the fights they take, and the difference in pay. Like, what does that mean to you?
Well, let me start with the difference in pay. What it means to me is that they've been backwards for a really long time. But to be fair, and this is really the only thing that needs to be understood about it. And I guess the rest of what I'm about to say doesn't mean anything, but, no, the most important thing is that things are worth what someone's willing to pay for them. And this is entertainment, all of it. It's not sports entertainment. Sports are entertainment. They're the exact same thing. It's like saying sports or entertainment. It's stupid. Let me say that first and foremost. So people want to watch boxing. It's a good atmosphere. It's always had this certain really good, cool sports atmosphere. And that's what people are paying for. Since as long as I can remember, people would be, I'm having a fight party, and they come over, you have pops and chips and stuff like that, and sandwiches, just a whole smorgasbord of stuff laid out just to watch two men beat the hell out of each other, and that's the atmosphere people are paying for. When it comes to UFC, they're paying for the same thing, but it's not as entertaining. With boxing, we know what we're getting. We've known for decades what we're getting with boxing, so not decades, like some centuries, I should say. I'm sorry. You can always pack a house with boxing. It's like two gladiators going at it. And even though they might not do the same damage as MMA, it's, look at retired fighters, man. Like, they can't talk well. They can't speak well, or like, not all of them. Like, you get beat up in there. You take a beating. You don't come out of MMA like that. You really don't. And that's what, cause they're completely different, but, they're putting more on the line. You're more likely to die in that boxing ring than you are the octagon.
Yes.
And that's worth extra money. Also, you got to talk a much bigger talk, because the heavyweight champion of the world has been a big deal for a very long time. Very long time. That's why Brock Lesnar is introduced the way he is. That's why they put heavyweight in that title, because they could just say WWE champion, or universal champion. The reason Paul Heyman, his manager, says heavyweight is because of Tyson Fury and those who have come before him. Speaking of, Fury needs to lose. Not for us, but, for the sport. You know why? It drops him back down in the pool, and then he can fight anyone at that point. But without that loss, without losing that title, nobody can really fight him. Like, we're just going to start picking, people's grandmothers out of the audience to fight him at some point. But I'm just saying, there's not a lot of people to fight him anymore. But, Tyson Fury, he went over and had a match with Braun Strowman in WWE. He went and crossed over to another combat sport. Ngannou wants to do that, but how willing is Ngannou to do that because
Yeah.
Tyson Fury sells the hell out of that fight. He makes you want to kill him in a sport where you can literally kill him in the ring. So the pay makes sense because I'm willing to pay, high risk, high reward. I'm not saying Ngannou didn't risk anything, especially fighting, mixed martial arts, the way you could get knocked out there. But in terms of pay, it should go in all sports. It should go boxing, pro wrestling. Like I said, you can't get around boxing. In terms of being physical, pro wrestling number one. Then we're talking about MMA, hockey, football, rugby. The more physical sports should get the most money. You know who should be getting paid $600,000? Steph Curry. Instead, he's getting $200 million. Now, listen, we're just talking about in terms of physicality.
Yeah, in terms of what they risk to what they get for reward.
Right. Because the worst he could do is mess his legs up. Maybe break a finger. I mean, somebody just fractured their wrist, but when I was watching that Bulls game, somebody had fractured their wrist like a little bit later, but
yeah, they're not going to die on the court.
Right. He'll be back in 8 weeks. Like if you had a fight, that'd be different because that's his wrist, but I always thought that it should have been the most physical people putting on the like you're a pro wrestler. Any move that happens could kill you. A DDT is meant to kill you. It's meant to, if I DDT you, that's definitely, in real life, that's definitely attempted murder. Or it's aggravated assault, one. But, it's attempted murder if I do it on a hard surface. Right? So, and then these people go out and they do that for a week straight, so I think they should be getting a lot of money. Boxing, you're taking the real hits. You're legitimately getting hit in the face. So there's a higher risk there. I know in pro wrestling, yeah, you risking your life, but it's done in such a way when you're trained. It's done in such a way that you're not supposed to be injured whatsoever. So that's, the risk should be, it's a high risk, but you shouldn't be injured, mostly. So Ngannou, in terms of what he has to do, is what Tyson Fury did. And he started to act like a diva when it came to his pay. I didn't like the way he looked at, Cyril Gane, in a couple pay-per-views. I think it was the title fight with him and Derek Lewis, Gane and Lewis, that Ngannou kind of brushed him off like he was nothing. And I'm like, look, that's not going to get you anywhere. Look at Conor McGregor. He made all his money, but look at him. Look at where he is. He crossed over, but he just did it with such a disdain. Like Tyson Fury's a gimmick. Conor McGregor's living his gimmick. He's like the old adage they say about rappers, like, oh, he's living that street life now, that thug life. Yeah, but like, look at what it gets you. So you better pretend to live it and rap about it, but don't live it. Because once you start living it, you're gonna get yourself in trouble. And Tyson Fury understands how to rap about it. And I'm not saying he ain't got that life, but he ain't doing it anymore. There's a lot of rappers that get $1 million deal and they still selling drugs. They're clearly insane. But it's like you don't need to do that anymore. But Ngannou, he needs to do that right now. He needs to be about that life, he needs to be about that life and talk that talk and then remember that he's not in that life anymore. That's the thing about Conor McGregor. He forgets that it's not out on the streets. It's all different now. He doesn't need to talk so tough. Sure, sell a fight. You can tell people, hey man, I'll go back to the streets. I'll go back to jail. That's cool, but don't actually do that stuff. That's stupid. You just need to sell the fight. Just talk to me. Say, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'll do it. I'll believe you, and we can move on from there. Ngannou isn't what does he have any sound bites? You know, is he a meme? Does he have any memes? Anything marketable about him besides he's a big black dude?
Yeah, it's, I get what you're talking about in terms of the Tyson Fury element of being able to sell versus and obviously the boxing aspect of the higher risk to higher reward, obviously. I don't think the gap should be as big as it is. I mean, you know, boxing, there's been a lot of deaths. Not a lot, but, you know, look at the history of boxing. There's been a few, and more than a lot, countless cases of brain trauma leading to a severely poor end of life for these retired boxers. Obviously due to the head trauma that they go through, CTE being a big thing. But it is common in MMA, and it's going to become more common at the fact that the sport's growing, it's getting bigger, there's going to be more athletes competing. They're not going to face the same level of risk to a certain degree because of the variety in ways that MMA is conducted in terms of wrestling and jiu-jitsu, which is, you know, jiu-jitsu is quite safe. You know, yeah, you can break an arm, you can break a leg, someone can get you in a horrible position. You're not really it's not gonna end fatally for you though, is it? So it's balancing the fact that boxing is more, it's got a bigger risk factor, but at the same time, its tradition and its history, where it's been for so long, probably extends why there's a gap. UFC's only been around for 25 years, although MMA's been around longer. But
absolutely, because you and I can talk about boxing for years.
Oh,
and
yeah.
we'll exhaust. We only have 25 years worth of just UFC, just mixed martial arts. Like, we can go back further than that. We can, but like, we're going to exhaust our knowledge of MMA much quicker than we would boxing. You know, we just keep going back with boxing. We just talk about Floyd Mayweather himself. That is it. We only need to talk about one boxer and spend a year talking about Floyd Mayweather. We can take one fight a week that he's had, right? We can take 1 week every week, and we can break down one different fight that he's had. That's one boxer, just one. So there's a very rich history, but what do you think Ngannou needs to do? Like, you asked me the question, like, what does he need to do to get there and make up that gap? Like, what's marketable about him? Like, what do you think he can do or needs to do to get more than $600,000? Forget about a couple million, or, you know, like, how can we get him 1 million even?
I mean, obviously, I would say go into boxing, which would just be completely like dismissing the argument of like the gap of pay and stuff. It would just be like, oh, just accept that there's a difference and just, you know, don't give in, but just accept the fact that you can go and make it in boxing. But if we're talking about what he can do to make himself a bigger draw for UFC, for MMA, in my opinion, I don't think Francis Ngannou needs to make himself a bigger draw. I don't think he's not a type of person that needs to get on the mic and sell a fight. He's one of those few fighters on the planet that doesn't have to say anything, and I will watch him fight. And a lot of people will because of that power, because you just look at him and you think, that's the guy I want to watch. And yeah, okay, the last fight, it did, you know, that highlight knockout that we normally see didn't happen. But for me, he could cross over into boxing, he could stay at the UFC. I think the options are already shrinking. He's obviously had the surgery that he's away to go under for the injuries that he had before the Cyril Gane fight. Tyson Fury's now got an opponent against Dillian Whyte. So that cuts out the boxing aspect of fighting Tyson Fury. Was that ever going to happen? I don't think so. It would have happened. It would have helped for money, which is what you asked. But for me, I just think I don't see Francis needing to do anything other than what he's doing. I think he's got to be true to himself. I think he's got to advocate that he deserves more money, and he will get more money. He doesn't have to go out there and say to social media, start becoming a different person than who he is, because Bellator, Eagle FC, you think of the money that if they can afford it in one championship in the Asian region, how much sort of anticipation it would be for the Japanese communities to watch Francis Ngannou on their promotion. I know that it would be strange and stuff, but it's happened before. We've seen these big heavyweights go over in Glory and Pride, the Pride days, the WEC days. This happened before, Alistair Overeem. It's been seen before, and I wouldn't be surprised if Francis Ngannou leaves the UFC, goes somewhere else, makes a lot more money. Obviously, boxing would be the number one in terms of how he quickly can make that money, but I don't want to see Francis change who he is just to get a bigger paycheck. I would like to see him, if he was to go to boxing, I would like to see him fight. Because for me, I think Francis could earn a lot of money. I don't think he's going to earn the money he's looking for if he fights a heavyweight boxer that isn't one of the best boxers. I think that interest will slowly fade from people, even in MMA, that follow him, because if he doesn't fight a name in boxing, it's not going to generate the money he thinks he'll earn. So I think he's got to fight a Deontay Wilder, a Derek Chisora, who's in this country, an Andy Ruiz, one of these heavyweight boxers that, a Joseph Parker, one of these heavyweight boxers outside of the Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, and Alexander Usyk. That's where the money is for him, I think.
My only problem with him starting so high is it definitely won't be a career for him. It'll just be, I fought this guy for money. Because if he loses, that's it. And he could easily lose against a Wilder. I don't think Wilder's, he's not a great boxer. He's not technical, but he's a boxer, so it could look like what Jake Paul did to everybody. So, I'm a little, he could just get knocked out, and that'd be bad. And it'll make him look bad. It'll make the sport look bad. He'll never get paid in MMA again. Not the money he's worth.
I wrote in that article I did on Francis Ngannou. You can check it out on MMATorch.com. I had a little bit of a inkling that I read Jake Paul write something about stay tuned, and it was right after Francis made I think it was his announcement that you wrote about, where he is taking half of his purse for the UFC in Bitcoin, and I got the impression that Jake Paul was perhaps going to make a move to get Francis Ngannou after this fight and sign him under his MVP promotion, which he has Amanda Serrano under, obviously himself, and he's looking to expand that. He obviously has the money that he can pay these big named boxers, combat sports athletes. And I was like, is Jake Paul going to sign Francis Ngannou under his promotion and have him fight on his cards? It's not even crazy anymore to me. I really could see that happening. I think you could see that happening as well. And
absolutely.
Who knows? I mean, I don't know what's next for Francis. But like I said, there's got a lot of heavyweight fights coming up that are really interesting, and I hope Francis is one of them.
I know Logan Paul's been on WWE TV, and that's been good for him. I think that him getting a pro wrestler, who Jake Paul would be great with? I don't know if you watch NXT, but Grayson Waller. Grayson Waller's basically Jake Paul. That's his character in NXT right now. Cause he's got the boxing trunks. He's a young hip dude, and he's annoying. At least people find him annoying. I think he's great, but he's basically Jake Paul right now in NXT, and he's generating a lot of buzz actually. I think he got hurt. I think he hurt himself, hamstring or something. So I think he's out for a while. That's just speculation, but it looked like he hurt himself in the last match he was in at the very last minute. The last thing he did was hurt himself. But that happens sometimes. But Jake Paul getting a pro wrestler and dropping them, or, just kind of dropping them in WWE, or just like mentoring someone from WWE. The reason I like to see that is because maybe, just maybe, you can have agents, you can have get a real agent for pro wrestlers and see what you could do there. That'll help everyone out. And it's a big stage. It's a weekly stage. You know what I mean? Like, if he is linked to a guy in WWE as his protege, I think that goes a long way just for the brand and just so people get to know that he's out here, and that he's for the talent. I know people won't take it seriously, but I just think it helps everybody if he were to do that. I think he does have, so, the lawsuit came right after, UFC threatened Nagano with a lawsuit for talking to Jake Paul in the first place. So
yes,
they might as well make it worth his while. If that lawsuit really goes through, then Jake Paul would probably pay for it. That's what I do. If I'm Jake Paul, I pay for it, pay for the cost or whatever. And I say, yeah, I paid for him. It's cool. You can have that little money because I'm going to make more money. And it's done. It's going to show up. It's going to show up Dana White. And it's also going to teach people to be smarter because they're not going to take to Jake Paul immediately, but they're going to start to talk to him because they're going to see what's happening. So, like I said, this heavyweight fight was the most important fight in UFC's history.
Mm.
And we're seeing that right now.
Well, we'll be talking about a lot of these things in the coming weeks. A lot about, the heavyweight fights, the Jake Pauls, the Dana Whites, the fighter pay. Seems a very trendy topic right now, but we've not got long left, so we've got a couple of topics left to just quickly cover. I'm just going to ask you one thing about a recent UFC fighter that was released from his contract. Jeremy Stephens, a former UFC lightweight, had a lot of great fights. He was tied for, I think he was tied, or he might even have the record for the most UFC fights in history. I think he might, if he's not first, I think he's second. So a very accomplished veteran of MMA, UFC in particular. What would be your sort of lasting memory of Jeremy Stephens in the UFC? I know mine. I think if you can't quite, I'll give you a second to think about it. Actually, I'll just tell you mine. Of all the fights that he's had, the moment at UFC 205 in New York on the press conference when Conor McGregor got on the mic and he got asked who would give you the hardest fight up on that stage, and Jeremy Stephens, God bless him, turned around and said, right here, I'm the hardest 155-pound hitter in the UFC. And Conor McGregor said those infamous words, who the F is that guy?
and that's what I meant. Like, nobody has a soundbite like Conor like that. That's why I was saying, like, in terms of who Nagano is, like, he doesn't have that. And that's really important. Like, it was hilarious. Conor McGregor in his prime, that's when he was in his prime. That was hilarious. Like, I didn't like that. I didn't like him. I never liked that Jeremy Stephens never lived up to the hype I thought he was supposed to. That's my problem with him. That was definitely my his biggest moment.
Yeah. He did have some good wins. Obviously, the Gilbert Melendez was a big win. Josh Emmett was, that knockout, that was a good win. But you're right. I mean, if you look at a lot of the fights to the tailor end, he was fighting good guys, but 5 fights in a row he lost in the UFC. I mean, it's no coincidence that he was released, but yeah, that moment for me, that tops it for him.
Yeah, he could have been better. And not get me wrong, I'd probably still pick him in instances I'm not supposed to because of the athlete he is. He's like a Carlos Condit, but without like the anything. No,
Yeah,
like
he's just
he's like Carlos Condit. He's a highly skilled guy, but with nothing to show for it.
he just
You know?
he put it all out there, but I don't think it really went his way, especially in the UFC. But good luck to him. I think he's already got a deal in place for PFL. I'm hearing, so we'll see where it comes for him. But
Yeah.
we've only got a couple of minutes left, but we talked about it a little bit last week. UFC's back this weekend for all the guys and girls that listening that want a little bit of an update on the card. I mean, just quickly going through it now, you've also got the main event, Jack Hermansson, Sean Strickland. Should be a decent fight. Sean Strickland's got a bit of an unorthodox fighting stance and fighting style. Jack Hermansson's quite good all round. I think both of them really need the win. Jack Hermansson especially, I think he's had a bit of a rocky pathway in the UFC so far, but Shavkat Rakhmonov, he's 14-0. I've just been, doing a little bit of searching about to get people a bit interested in this card, get Sean interested in this card, because it is difficult when you look at the names. Phil Hawes back from his loss against Chris Curtis, but yeah, like you said, Sean, I think it was the last week or the week before, I think these fight nights really need to start picking up, otherwise, like the WWE's, the Triller events, they're going to start taking a lot of shine off of these weekends if the UFC continues this way, other than the pay-per-views. But, what would you say you're really looking forward to this weekend for UFC?
I'm not looking forward to it. I just don't care.
Right.
I'm not even supposed to say that. Like that's the bad part about it. I don't care at all. I would love to say I do, but in the end, it doesn't mean anything. If someone wins, who's getting the next title shot out of any of the winners here?
I think, obviously none other than the main events are ranked, so other than the main event, no one would. But I think Sean Strickland, if he gets an impressive win, and he's got his fights tend to be quite exciting. The way he fights, his pressure, his pace. He's a bit, he's a live wire on the mic outside of the octagon, but inside the cage, he's a madman. And I think, he's not going to get a title shot if he wins. He's 7 in the world. He's fighting number 6 in Jack Hermansson. But I think if Jack Hermansson wins, he's going to need another 1 or 2 fights before he thinks about a title shot, and they need to be wins, and they need to be in the top 5 guys. So you're right. There's no one here that's going to really be taking title shot contention. Maybe Sean Strickland, but like you said, it's another weekend where you're thinking, what else is going on?
I just wish that I don't need weekends to be loaded. We just need. Can they at least say the next person, the winner of this fight gets a title shot at least? Because I know that's a very pro wrestling thing to do, but damn, it works because it's gonna make me watch.
And create a storyline outside of the fight. It's just
if they create just a little bit of a story, it'd be great. Because if they said, the winner's going to get a title shot, then I would watch it because I know that person's going to be on a much bigger card, a much bigger fight, not too long from now. So that would be great, but, they don't have that. So it's just the state of MMA at the moment. Bader he just won a title and nobody gives a damn. How much money did he get?
Oh, we won't get into that. That'll take too long to discuss.
No, I'm just saying, if Nagano got $600,000, man, Ryan Bader is probably picking up cans on the side of the road.
Oh, for sure.
So it's I think Bellator pays better, but I don't know that, and it's not a bigger stage. So MMA is in a pretty sad state right now, and that's because no one's excited about it, and that's why we keep talking about the biggest man in combat sports, Jake Paul. We talked about Jake Paul. We talked about Brock Lesnar and Ronda Rousey. Two haven't been in the MMA in years, and one's never been in it. But those are the biggest names we talked about. There's a severe problem with with all of that, and that's why the pay there's why there's a discrepancy in pay there, and that's why we talked about Tyson Fury and stuff like everything. This is an MMA show. We don't have to fill it with other things, but who really wants to talk about some of the other like the undercard of this fight night coming up? Yeah, and that's unfortunate to say because these are I love all athletes. Yeah. And it's unfortunate to say, but
we'll talk about it. But you're right. No one's really going to be interested, and that's why the pay. That's another contributing factor to why pay is so different because no one's really getting up for it. So the revenue's not being generated there. I mean, we'll talk about it. We're interested in it. We like it, but the average fan won't, and that's the problem. And it's a problem that's been around for a long time. You're right about there's a bit of a. I think to class that it's MMA is a sad sight in general. I know you're not doing it in general. I know there is a lot of interesting things. You've got, a lot of big fights scheduled coming up, in all combat sports. But you're talking about the general of fighter pay versus the fights that are actually being made that aren't getting us as fans interested other than the big fights on the pay-per-view cards. We're talking about these fight nights where, if you've not got a pay-per-view once every month, what are you doing with those other 3 weeks? And right now, it's not great. But, there is some things to look forward to. As always, on the Weekend Warrior Show, we'll try and get you those most interesting topics. It's another show in the books for me and Sean. Thank you, Sean, as always, for being here. And we'll see you guys next week on the Weekend Warrior Show, presented to you by MMA Torch. Thanks for listening.